Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today we're going to do a little bit of a GM tip. Let's roll it. So, one of the things that I really enjoy about being a dungeon master or a game master is world building. It is one of my most favorite things. I love to create an entire world for people to play in. However, one of the things I have noticed in the two worlds that I have now created for play is the stuff that I build in the world is really just for me. And if I try to create the entire world and lay it out for people beforehand, then I'm going to be tempted to do nothing but exposition dumps, which nobody wants. The world building should be there to help people discover what is out there. And that includes for you as the GM. I want guidance to be able to handle the different things that the players throw at me or that the world needs to do because of something they've discovered and I hadn't quite thought out yet. So for me, that's the basis of building a world. So what I do is I create things like political boundaries or a general overview of a history, build in some tension. Why do the races work together in this area, or why don't the races work together in this area? I don't go into a whole lot of detail, but it's enough to get people willing to explore it and buy into the environment. Beyond that, however, I enjoy making stuff up on the fly. At my basic fantasy table, for example, I don't even have a big bad guy created yet. This is something that might freak some folks out. I have a general take on what people are doing. I have an understanding of what the motivations of the characters are. The person who formed the party is trying to prove his worth to his god and to his community. So that's kind of a good thing to build off of. But beyond that, I didn't really have anything to start. I created this world simply as a test to see how much I liked playing basic fantasy role-playing game. Turns out quite a bit. So as they've continued to move forward, I've now expanded the mythology based on the types of things that they do and encounter and believe themselves. So when the party talks, I go, that is interesting. Maybe I should incorporate that. But for me, the real fun is when I get to make lore up on the fly. The last time I played with my basic fantasy table, they had been hired by a merchant in order to go recover some goods that had been stolen. The merchant, in their mind, is a little bit shady. I'm not quite sure if he is yet or not. But they took it because they wanted him to give them some answers on some questions they had, and they needed some cash, so that was something that was important too. So he took them to the capital city of the area, so it was their first time seeing my map of Port Rufine, which was really kind of fun, and he gave them instructions about where his caravan had been attacked and the goods taken. So I have to create a landmark, which I had not thought up before. Maybe I should have, but I hadn't. And so as I was sitting there, I go, okay, here's what you're looking for. You will see the broken tree. And they were like, well, what's that? I was like, well, you'll know when you see it. Okay. And I didn't describe it at the time, partly because I didn't have a picture of it in my head yet. And he told them, get to the broken tree and then turn east. So when they got there, I now had to describe the broken tree. What was it? And so I described this immense willow tree, its trunk almost as wide as a house. But the trunk had been split at some point in the past, and the two halves had curled back down toward the ground. And with the trunk pouring out that way and the leaves coming down to the ground and rustling in the wind, it almost gives this impression that it is a fountain. It's a pretty neat description. And they went, all right, we found the broken tree. This has to be it. And they turned east and they had a nice parlay with some wugs and they got the goods back without having any combat. So really good job on their part with their role playing. But then they come back and they want to know more about this tree. What is it? So already at this point, they have a general conflict. There is a god of chaos who is waking up, wants to destroy the world. The one guy who started the party is a cleric. His higher up in his organization is a little bit nervous by the news that they have brought. And so he's now out investigating. And so in this same dungeon where they first encountered some followers of this awakening god, they found a secret room with a shrine of a god that no one had heard of before, someone who had been forgotten. That was a god of life and light, kind of the antithesis of the god of chaos. And there was kind of a pre-recorded message in a statue that blessed them and told them they had to stop the darkness from coming, offered them a suit of armor and a sword and some other items that were in a locked chest. Obviously magic, because they'd been there for who knows how long and still were in working condition. And I described the armor as having an emblem in the breastplate. Never described what it looked like. I just said there was a sigil there. And so when we got to the clearing where the broken tree was, after they had returned from their negotiations, someone asked me, does that tree look like the sigil on the one character's armor that he has? Well, that's a great idea. Yes, it does. It looks like a stylized version of that tree. And then, oh, we know that this goddess is now tied to this armor, that this tree somehow is linked to the goddess's power. This is amazing. But no one in the area knows anything about the lore, mostly because the GM didn't know anything about the lore until that moment. And this became a great time of role-playing where they're trying to commune with this goddess to find out what it is that they need to do. And so that was kind of fun. They had a wonderful conversation. The guy who wears the armor always fails his wisdom checks, though, so he still hasn't heard this goddess's voice, and the goddess is getting a little bit annoyed with him, to tell you the truth. But other characters had a great conversation, and they learned some things about the lore. But also, I invented an NPC there who came up to the cleric and said, I should have known someone that was devoted to the holy would recognize the sacredness of this space. So maybe this forgotten god is not as forgotten as the general population thinks. And in that moment, I created part of the mythology as this goddess is asleep in order to keep the goddess of chaos from coming back. They're supposed to sleep somehow together, and they're bound. And if the goddess is waking up, that means chaos is waking up and danger is increasing. This is a great moment of tension for the party. I had none of this in my head. This had not been pre-planned. This had not been mapped out. I had no idea it was going to happen when we sat down to the table at the time. But because I had a general guide in how I wanted the world to kind of unveil itself based on what the characters were doing and the general structure I had set up, when that moment came and people saw this incredible landmark, they realized in their own minds, this had to have something to do with the overall plot. There should be a reason why we are sent here. I just needed them to turn right. But in their minds, something that immense had to be incredible. And from that, we built something that was remarkable. So much so that I have a friend who is a graphic designer and is trying to get back into painting and drawing a little bit more. And I described the scene to him, and he created this image based on my description. It's not quite done yet, but it is fantastic. Take a look. That is, for me, one of the most cool things ever, because that is my first glimpse at a world that I helped create with my party in some sort of visual form. It had only existed in our heads. And when I showed that image to everybody on our Discord chat, they went, yes, that's it. That's where we were. Really cool. When the players and the GM help make the world together, beautiful and incredible things happen. Next week, I think I might try to roll up a character in Mutant Future, just to see what it's like. But until then, happy playing, everyone.